So I wanted to do a video on batch painting some minis. So I got some of these little Reaper Bones guys. They're super cheap. Like they're like $2 each. At least where I got them from. These are just like some zombies, like some Egyptian zombie guys. The plastic is like bendy plastic, so if you drop them, you won't break them. You know, like their little swords won't snap off or whatever. But the cleanup is pretty minimal. Like if you can see some of the detail on this guy, like I don't really see any seam lines that kind of stand out. Yeah, I'll just to show kind of how I would do that if there were seam lines. Just take the edge of the X-Acto and then just kind of shave them down. But yeah, I mean, these guys actually look really good, you know, just right out of the box. I think they're really good for kind of like beginner painters. So yeah, we're gonna batch paint them. So first I'm gonna stick them down to this piece of MDF, and I think I'm just gonna use some like double-sided tape or like sticky tack or something like that, like the stuff you use to hold up posters with. So I've got these guys just sort of taped down to this MDF with a little bit of packing tape. Doesn't need to be too sticky. Just needs to be temporary. So, and now I'm going to hit them with a shot of primer, and I'm going to use this Vallejo surface primer. It's a really good primer. It sticks really good. It's a little bit light. That's the only thing I don't like about it, but I really like Vallejo's paints. So after I hit them with the primer, I can definitely see some spots. Well, I wasn't really looking at the bases, I was looking at the models themselves, but you can see how sometimes the seam lines really stand out after you prime things. Also, you can see how light that primer is, because these guys were kind of like white originally. This guy's a little bit darker gray, but with the primer on them, you don't need that much. It's just so that the paint will stick. But even, you know, just a little bit is kind of enough to help the paint kind of stick to them. So next I'm gonna hit them with a shade like a kind of a dark brown shade, like a burnt umber shade. I'm using this Tamiya flat brown, not for any particular reason. I'm just trying to kind of use these up. And then I'm going to thin it down a little bit. I'm going to go about like 2/3 paint, 1/3 water, just so I have good coverage with the airbrush. If your paint is too thick in your airbrush, you'll get splotchy results. these guys all have pretty good coverage right now. I went ahead and mixed up a pretty simple palette. These are really watered down, and I'm just gonna kind of wet blend them on these guys. Try and get them to try and get some of the details to pop, like in their rags and stuff. So I'm gonna go over them and then kind of bring some of the highlights to the front. So I'm kind of going through with like successive passes and lightening up spots where like the sunlight's gonna hit. I actually want my shadows to be that kind of dark brown, and I want the highlights to be this kind of sand color, like a dirty bandage, you know, a used bandage, or well, like a mummy, you know, like how mummies are supposed to look. So I'm just kind of gradually going through and lightening those colors in some places, and then leaving them like a dark brown in other places. Just doing like little successive passes, and wet blending isn't really the word, I guess. Glazing, yeah, glazing is the word. That's what I'm doing. Kind of glazing on highlights gradually as I go. And then leaving some spots, like I want this cavity here to stay like a nice dark brown, but then I want his legs that are facing the sun here, I want those to be sort of more bleached looking. So I'm just gonna gradually make successive passes and kind of glaze on a little bit of color, and but you know, I'm not too worried about details right now. Just kind of like getting the general tone down, and then we'll worry about details later. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. So I have these guys a little more lightened up in the areas where I want them, and then I'm gonna actually start putting in some highlights with this kind of yellow kind of sand color, and then the last highlight is going to be kind of more like a bone color, and I'm going to use that on the bandages as well as their bones. It's going to kind of like blend together. They aren't going to look like skeletal remains, like they're going to look like mummies that have been just lying in the dirt for, you know, eons. Alright, now that I've got some highlights on, some of these kind of dingy yellow looking highlights, for the last little bit of highlights, I'm going to go over these guys with some bleached bone, which is a Citadel color. This is a heavier paint. I think they call it, I'm not sure, it might be like a layer or a base layer. It's definitely not a glaze though. So I've been kind of glazing up to this point, but I'm not going to dry brush. I'm going to kind of gradually build up the highlights with this. I'm going to dilute this and then slowly build up some highlights with more glazes. So these last little bit of highlights, I have this color, I don't know if you can really tell, it's about as thin as like milk, and it's just thick enough, or just thin enough to still be opaque. Like if I draw it out, it's pretty opaque, but I'm just gonna gradually build. It's like dry enough to not flow into the cracks, or thick enough to not flow into the cracks, but and just be opaque. So I'm gonna go over and make some highlights. It's tough filming like this. Just gonna go up and do some very light highlights. I don't want to wash out all of my other colors. Okay, so got everybody highlighted, you know, like mostly just the bandages and like bones and stuff kind of showing now. And now I want to kind of get all that toned down. I'm going to use like a transparent kind of yellow, and then just glaze over everything and give all the bandages and stuff like that a dirtier kind of tinge, and kind of seep into the cracks a little bit. Okay, so got some dirty looking bandages on them. I'm gonna go in and do a metallic coat on all of their weapons. Gonna use some bolt gun metal. just went over the weapons a little bit, give them a metallic shade. So now I'm going to try and tie everything together. I'm going to give it all a wash with some Nuln oil, another Citadel color. And it should run into all the cracks and make all the highlights pop and all of the little cracks darken. Nice and grody, mummy-like, but it dulled down my my highlights a little bit too much. So I'm going to go in and redo my highlights with the bleach bone. So these guys are mostly done now. I'm just gonna hit them with a few last little details. I kind of experimented on using a little bit of an ink on them, and I like how that looks to get kind of a bronzy looking effect. So I'm gonna try a little bit of that. And I'm also going to use a little bit of a bronze pigment. So I'm just using a little bit of ink. I'm going to just dab a little bit of ink onto some spots to sort of make some areas look a little bit more like bronze, like on this guy's helmet. Like that, and then I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of this bronze pigment. nice bronze looking color. There we go. Looking good. Okay, now that I've got these guys all bronzed up, I think I'm gonna give this guy a little bit of TLC. So I want his helmet. I want some of the bronze to kind of show through, like the rust and like tarnish and stuff. But I want him to look like he had some status before he decayed. So I want to paint him up with some pigments that, like some bright colors. Like I have some of this stuff, some kind of dry brush colors. Skink blue, and a Hellion green color. So I'm gonna kind of hit him with some of these colors, and you know, traditionally colors like this would be, you'd have to either use like a mountain of like seashells to make them, or like grind up gemstones, so like it shows some status or something on his helmet. But I want to kind of make it like splotchy so that his helmet sort of shows through. So this stuff is kind of interesting. It's meant for dry brushing, this color. So the paint is like really thick. It's almost like spongy, but it's really just meant for like a dry brushing layer. But that's exactly how I want to use it. Actually, like out of the jar, that's how I want it to look. So let's see. It's gonna be. I want the darker color on the inside, I think. So these guys are looking good. I sort of redefined some of the little bandages a little bit, made the highlights try to make the highlights pop out a little bit more, but I might go over them with another little wash or something. But first I think I'm gonna rebase them. The plastic on these is a little bit cheesy, and I feel like these guys are kind of top heavy. So what I want to do is just add some extra slot of bases that I'm just gonna glue them to, and then I'm gonna do some texturing to the bases. First I'm just gonna hit these little nubs on the side with a file. Kind of knock them down a little bit. Alright, so I just super glued these guys to the bases. Just used like some kind of like medium heavy CA glue, cyanoacrylate super glue, and it takes like 5 minutes to dry, but you can use an accelerant. You can use like something like this, a cyanoacrylate accelerator, which makes it dry like cure almost instantly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put something on it to kind of retexture the bases a little bit. This is just some fiber paste. So it sort of has like a paper kind of like pulp stuff to it, but it makes a really good texture. So I'm going to use a kind of a crapped out brush and just kind of fill in some spots and sort of retexture the base, like filling in the cracks that the rebasing them left behind, and make sure that I don't build it up too high around his feet. So these guys are all dry. The bases are done. Looks like it didn't totally fill in all the cracks, but that's okay. I mean, these guys are like red shirts anyways, or they're supposed to be. They're supposed to just get knocked down by my my PCs in my campaign. So, except for this guy, he's supposed to be kind of the boss. But so what I'm gonna do now is, and then I actually put some more aquarium gravel down, and it doesn't look out of place at all. Like, I think I might just leave it, and not even paint it. But I'm gonna do a little brown coat on the base, and then I'm gonna texture a little bit more, or not texture, sorry, do some highlights on the texture. So I'm going to start out with this kind of dark khaki sand color. It's already kind of runny, but I'm going to water it down quite a bit. Actually didn't need anywhere near that much, just a little bit. We've been playing. But I'm going to, I want it to be still opaque, but I want it to be super runny. So I'm going to just add some water to it to make it nice and runny. Like not even like water consistency, not even milk consistency. In fact, it's almost to the point where it's breaking, like where the pigments and the water have separated so much that it's like breaking. Definitely more of like a wash. And then this stuff, this texture, what you call it, the fiber paste stuff is it soaks up paint just fine. You don't need to, it's like a gesso or something like that. Like, you don't need to prime it or anything like that. It kind of soaks up paint like like paper, because it It has, I don't think it even really has any pigments in it. It is like paper and just binder, and that's pretty much it. I actually made that a little too early. And I'm not worried about it running over his feet at all, just because it's like, it's already like a sand color. You could probably, you know, wash these guys with this stuff and it would look just fine. Just kind of tone down those highlights and run into the cracks a little bit. That actually looks pretty good. And I might just go over these guys a little bit. Now I'm going over the bases while it's still a little bit tacky with some pigments, some pan pastels. It's this stuff, it's just pigments in a little cake pan. Pan pastels, it's just like, you know, raw pigment. But it starts to make the details pop out a little bit. Been a little bit heavy-handed with that one, but I'll go a little bit lighter on this one. And lastly, I'm going to go over them with some lighter pigments. I couldn't find the pan pastels that I usually buy, but this giant jar of pigment was like $6 at my art supply store. So I'm going to try this. Yeah, I like that. It definitely looks like sand. And if you hit their feet with it, it's, you know, not a big deal because it just looks like sand. You know, just got a little bit of sand on their feet. So last, I'm just gonna dry brush some really light highlights with some bleach blend. Or you could use, like, if you're using acrylics, you could use a unbleached titanium. Last, I'm just going to go around the base with some flat black and sort of redefine the little black plastic. Straight out of the jar. If I can get it open. Okay, so there we go. That's the finished product. Here's a good picture of these guys. And yeah, I'm really happy with them. I like them. Anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for visiting my channel. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something.